Good morning. Good morning, and it's good to have you all here today. We've been discussing the Tenso Kyokan, a writing of Ehe Dogen, which he undertook after a few years after returning from China, when he was setting up his own monastery outside of Kyoto. And the Tenso Kyokan is usually translated instructions for the cook, but quite clearly in reading it, it has wider application. It's more like instructions for life. The final part of the Tenso Kyokan deals with the three minds, Sanshin. Minds, heart, mind, attitude, spirit. The way one approaches daily life. And in Buddhist literature, in various traditions, there are other renditions of the three minds that are somewhat different. But the one we'll be talking about is the one that is referred to in the Soto Zen tradition and is described in the final section of the Tenso Kyokan. Now, this whole idea of writing down a recommendation for the three minds is based on a premise, and that is that it's possible to cultivate one's attitude or one's spirit, and that it can be done beneficially. And I think this is a broadly accepted tenet in all cultures. Around the same time as the Buddha was living, far away in Greece, Socrates was talking about the good life and how to live the good life. And essentially, Buddha was also talking about how to live the good life. And the language and concepts are substantially different, but many of the conclusions are the same. The Buddha was a firm believer that one can cultivate mind, spirit, attitude. And the first two verses of the Dhammapada, the earliest recorded teachings of the Buddha, express that in saying, mind is the forerunner of all actions. All deeds are led by mind, created by mind. If one speaks or acts with a corrupt mind, suffering follows, as the wheel follows the hoof of an ox pulling a cart. Mind is the forerunner of all actions. All deeds are led by mind, created by mind. If one speaks or acts with a peaceful mind, happiness follows as surely as one's shadow. A poetic expression of the belief that we can cultivate attitudes that are beneficial and lead to better consequences. So, with that premise, Dogen describes the three minds. And we talked last week about Kishin, or energetic mind, joyful mind. And the second of the three minds is roshin, and the third, daishin. Roshin, literally old mind, and we'll talk about that today. And daishin, great mind, big mind, magnanimous mind, which we'll talk about in the future. So, I think it's also important to emphasize that these teachings are not to establish uniformity among individuals. I think of it as more like an orchestra where there is a wide range of different instruments, all expressing themselves, all of these skilled musicians expressing themselves through their instruments in different ways, but all with the same spirit, the same harmoniousness, the same effort to do their best, to play their part. So there are many ways of expressing Kishin. We talked about that last week, and there are many ways of expressing roshin. So old mind might sound a little misleading. What do they mean by old mind? Could be translated as elder mind. And roshin comes from the same root as roshi, or old teacher. Many of you are familiar with that term, roshi. Same ro. Dogen describes roshin using an analogy, the analogy of a parent. And the section in which he describes it is relatively short, so I'll read the whole thing. Roshin is the mind or attitude of a parent. In the same way that a parent cares for an only child, keep the three treasures in your mind. Three treasures: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. A parent, irrespective of poverty or difficult circumstances, loves and raises a child with care. How deep is this love? Only a parent can understand it. A parent protects the child from the cold and shades them from the hot sun with no concern for his or her own personal welfare. Only a person in whom this mind has arisen can understand it, and only one in whom this attitude has become second nature can fully realize it. This is the ultimate in being a parent. In this same manner, when you handle water, rice, or anything else, you must have the affectionate and caring concern of a parent raising a child. Kind of a surprising conclusion there, but we'll get to that. Well, it may be relevant here to note that Dogen lost his parents in childhood. His father died when he was about 2, by best information, and his mother died when he was 7 or 8. So his recollections of childhood are strongly colored by that experience. And one might say that in joining the monastery and looking for a teacher, he was, in a way, looking for a continuation of having a parent. He studied with Myosen, in Japan, and who escorted him to China. And then in China, he found what he considered his true teacher, roshin. I think clearly sort of a parent figure for him. So when Dogen is using this analogy of a parent, that may be problematic for some people, depending on what kind of parents they had, what experiences they had in childhood, what memories they have of childhood and of their parents. But Dogen here is referring to, I think, an ideal parent. An ideal parent, a source of unconditional love unconditionally. And I think most, if not all, parents will readily accept the notion that there is no such thing as an ideal parent. That children at times can be irritating. That patience can run short. That parents can become frustrated. Nonetheless, this spirit, this ideal of unconditional love is what Dogen is offering us and calling it roshin. And then we think of the spirit of a parent in terms of other persons, of other people, treating other people in a certain way. But Dogen is generalizing this to inanimate objects, to rice and water, to cookware, to all the things around us, both natural and man-made. Treating everything with a spirit of roshin, of parental mind. Taking care of things and taking care of people. Of course, there's some complexity here, especially when it comes to people. A parent clearly needs to take care of a child, especially a young child, in order for them to survive. But at some point, a parent needs to let the child go out on its own, develop its own way of expressing its life force, his or her life force. So it's always a balancing act. An act that I would submit is impossible to achieve successfully all the time. So there's this balancing between nurturing and controlling that needs to be established and reestablished and modified as a child grows up. And we need to apply that balancing act more generally as well. But in this passage, Dogen is inviting us to think in terms of roshin, parental mind, unconditional love, in everything we do, in everything we handle, in every person we meet. And this is the second of the three minds. So, a couple things come to mind in terms of questions about this for me. One is, can we think of examples? Because oftentimes our attitudes, our behaviors are most heavily influenced by people we meet, by encounters. Can we think of examples in our lives of parental mind, of expression of parental mind, of roshin? And another question is, since this, I would submit, is bound to fail at times, what do we do about that? What do we do when our expressions are not that of roshin, but something else, something perhaps more self-centered? What do we do with that? So I think I'll stop there, and we'll go into breakout rooms, and I'd be interested in your thoughts about roshin, how to express roshin, and how to deal with falling short. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your attention. And we'll get together in a few moments, and I'll see you then.